I'm going to go to welcome everybody. Good morning. Good morning. I am Dr. Pete, and I'm here with T for our Dr. Pete and T weekly session. We are live today instead of dropping a pre-recorded video. And today's topic is gout remission, keto backpacking. However, this is actually a deeper subject because oftentimes we get questions in regard to how it is to do exercise on the keto in the keto lifestyle, and really, so this topic today, it's about a backpacking trip that we just did. It's deeper than that because we want to talk about how good life is in the keto lifestyle. And oftentimes in the establishment, we hear a lot of negatives like, oh my God, you can't exercise on the keto diet. You can't do strength training on the keto diet. How could you go on a backpacking trip? Because you're not going to be able to, there won't be any food available for you. And then you also won't have the energy and things like that. So we're going to go live this morning. We're going to talk about these issues and the success that we have in this lifestyle, living life as good as you can have it. And so good morning to you. And I'm going to turn this over to T for a minute, and then we're going to look at some slides, and then we're going to have a conversation about the issues of, say, you want to go on a backpacking trip, which is the main thing we're going to be talking about here. But underneath that, what is the situation with exercise in general and activity in the keto lifestyle? Good morning, T-Bone.
Good morning, everybody. I think Dad here gave a phenomenal introduction about backpacking and keto, not only backpacking, but exercise. And so I think one of the big things that I want to discuss too throughout this live series is also talk to you about how my body felt on the keto diet lifestyle, actually is how I prefer to say that, the keto lifestyle, while we were in the canyon for 3 nights and 4 days. It was not easy hiking per se in any way, shape, or form. It was actually quite difficult, but I was really proud of how my body handled that super big challenge, but also how the keto lifestyle actually really, really benefited me. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you here today because we want to break the stigma behind why people shouldn't be on keto and exercise, because I will tell you, I am so glad I am on keto and I just did the backpacking trip like that. I think that is partially what got me out of the canyon. So I'm going to pass it back to my dad. Good morning, everybody. Welcome.
Okay, so let's look at some slides. All right, so again, our title is Gout Remission, but this has to do with anyone who's going to go into the keto lifestyle. It could be that you're suffering from type 2 diabetes, significantly overweight, and you want to get that weight down. And that's what the subject is, and this has a direct application to any of the to any of the issues with exercise, which I hope we're actually going to get to. So this is where we went. We went into the Grand Canyon, and the actual backpacking trip was extensive and by any standard is as difficult. The trails that we were on, we moved for 4 days straight. We had no rest days in there, and there were typical elevation gains and losses that were well over 2,000 feet at a time on average. So it was a tough trip. Average pack weights were about 40 pounds because it depends on whether or not you were a carb eater. And in our group, it was only T and I that were in the keto lifestyle, right? And we're going to get to the details on that. The other people were eating typical dehydrated or freeze-dried backpacking food that were highly ultra-processed and very, very high in carbs. So very, very different lifestyles spread over the 4 days. So here you can see the terrain, stunningly beautiful. Here's a shot of us on the first day at the very top of the canyon, basically. We're moving down 6 miles with an elevation loss that was over 3,000 feet, the size of El Cap. And a lot of that elevation gain, elevation loss happened in the first 3 miles. All right. And then after the first 3 miles, then the trail leveled out to some degree, right? You're still going downhill, but not at this extreme elevation loss. Pretty hard on the knees in general. You can see T is wearing knee sleeves that allow for compression and elevate the heat, which helps in her case and in my case with some strange fluid stuff that goes on anytime we're doing exercises that are pounding, like box jumps, or in this case, going downhill mile after mile. Here you see typical meal time. This was on the Horseshoe Mesa on the last night, but meal times were like this. We all gather around, T and I cooking meals that were keto, and I'm going to get to that, what we did, what our strategy was, what it meant in terms of our pack loads and whatnot, versus the other individuals that are boiling water basically for the freeze-dried backpacking food, which is high in carbs. And here we are at the top, and here you can see the packs. For T and I, we carried heavier packs than the other individuals, and the reason for that is because we were not eating freeze-dried food, right? We were eating keto food, and we're going to shift to talk about how we planned that and the things that we did. My slide presentation is deliberately relatively short because what I want to do is get to the conversation with Tanner, and we can talk about our different strategies. Same goals here, and that was to stay within the keto lifestyle for the whole 4 days that we were down there. Okay, so what did my menu look like? And again, we'll get to Tanner's viewpoints about this because she did things slightly differently. Well, there's and you guys can hear the variety on this. So the first thing is, I say loaded coffee in the morning, and that's kind of vague. What I did along with my wife was we bought the small packets from Starbucks of French roasted or Italian roasted coffee. I don't remember which one it was, with no additives to it. That was added to a cup, right? You make boiling water, and then to that coffee, I added salt, and then also heavy cream that I carried down into the canyon, along with some butter and along with some coconut oil, right? And that's, for me, what loaded coffee was. And I would have 3 cups. The salt was pretty crucial because, we're out moving. We're leaving breakfast, and then we're moving again. And I think our average mileage was somewhere around 5 miles a day. And then I also produced or made before we went on the trip. And that's the thing about this, is that I think T spent a couple of days doing cooking, and I spent 1 full day cooking. So I made 9 hard-boiled eggs that I took with me down into the canyon. And then each morning I would have 2 of those, peel them, cut them up, and then they were mixed with a ground chicken cheese casserole, the recipe for which I put in the show notes. And what I would do, I also made over the course of a week, I collected the drippings from various keto foods that I made in the kitchen. And so I had a container, and I'm going to show you a picture of the types of containers that we used for this. But I had a container that had the drippings from pork loin roast and also baked chicken. I mixed all that together. So what I would do in the morning is in my pot, I would add those drippings that had a lot of fat, right, from those mixed meals. Then I would add this cheese, this ground cheese casserole in there, and I would add a couple of eggs that were had been cut up, and then I would heat that, right, until it was sort of this mash and nice and hot, the cheese all melted and so on. And that's what I had for breakfast. And I did that each day. The only thing I didn't bring with me down there that I regret not bringing was some hot sauce. For dinners. Okay, so for the first dinner that I had, the very first night, before we went on the trip, I took 2 6-ounce petite sirloin steaks and I cooked them rare. All right, so they were cooked. I prefer my steak rare. So what I did then was I cooked my steaks, then I cut them up into bite-sized bits, and that went into a container. And then to that container, I added cooked broccoli, cauliflower, and cut up zucchini and yellow squash. And that went into a container. And so on the first night, what I did to prepare my dinner was literally I took my pot that I just described for breakfast again. I added the fat drippings that I had pre-prepared and carried down there, heated that up, right? So you get it hot and it's simmering. And then I added this steak mixture with the vegetables and heated that up. One nice comparison to the others that were boiling water was that the fact that we're just essentially I'm heating this food up. And I'm not having to actually like cook it per se because it's already been pre-cooked. The broccoli, the cauliflower, the zucchini that I was adding in there, that's been pre-cooked before we went on the trip, put into their own respective containers, kept in the refrigerator. So all of the food that I brought down there into the Grand Canyon had been pre-cooked into containers so that when we prepared the meal, you literally just have to heat it up. That's all you need to do. And so here you can see the 3 dinners that we had. Now, in the 2 subsequent meals, the salmon and, okay, so let me talk about the salmon. These were just the small, like tuna fish can sizes of salmon. And then when you're shopping for this, use common sense. So I went to the store and you go to the canned fish section, right? And you need to read the ingredient list. I chose salmon that had not been adulterated with all of these things. You're even going to find added sugars in this stuff for heaven's sakes. So I chose salmon to bring down in the canyon that did not have additives like that, right? This was as clean as you could get it. And then when I opened the cans, instead, so sort of backing out of this for a second, understand we went down in the Grand Canyon where water is an issue. And T and I hopefully will have a discussion about that if I manage to forget. But I did not drain the salmon, right? I opened it and then I used the meat along with the water that was in the can. And the reason I did that, you might be worried about having something that's soupy. I don't see a negative with that, was because I was utilizing the fact that there was water in there in addition to what I was having to carry. So it's a good way of doing it. And then for one of my dinners, I used the ground chicken casserole in combination with added cauliflower, zucchini, broccoli, and so on. Again, these were vegetables that I had pre-prepared before going into the canyon. They went into their own containers. Trail food, how are we doing that? All right, so I carried cheese. I carried dry salami that I purchased in the store, both the cheese and the salami. Again, when you're purchasing things like salami, you need to be careful about it because not all salamis are created equal. You're looking for salami that has been minimally processed, as low processing as you can get. And again, you have to read the ingredient list, right? I look at the nutrition label. First thing I look at there is the amount of carbs, total carbs, right? And if the salami has more than 1 gram of total carbs per serving, I put it back. And I look for a dry salami, a number 1 priority that doesn't have more than 1 gram of total carbs in it. And then I look at the ingredient list to make sure that they didn't secretly add sugar. And I'm also looking for ingredients that a short list, right? I don't want to see an ingredient list that's a mile long with every single thing you can imagine, chemical thing in there, the preservatives and this and that and all of that. So I'm looking for a dry salami that is pretty clean, as clean as you can get it, right? And then this is a really cool thing you can do. Trader Joe's has almond butter that has a relatively low total carb count in it. And then I have coconut oil. And so what I did was I made a 50-50 mixture of the almond butter from them and the coconut oil. You might have to heat the coconut oil a little bit in the microwave to get it to liquefy. And then I mix this stuff together. And this provides a mixture which is very, very calorically dense, right? It's very handy on the trail because you can take a tablespoon of it. And some of you might be arguing, well, Dr. Pete, it sounds like your carb count there might be a little bit elevated. But here's the thing you need to remember on a backpacking trip. We were moving every day. Minimum mileage was 5 miles, and minimum elevation gain and loss was 2,000 feet. On some days, significantly more. So the level of exertion on a trip like this was very, very high. And I wasn't worried about whether or not I was exceeding or having a little bit more complex quality carbs in my diet in a situation like that versus being at home with a low activity level where I'm maintaining 50 total grams of carbs per day. On a serious backpacking trip like that, I'm not so concerned about whether or not I'm going to exceed my 50 grams of total carbs per day. And on a few of those days, I know that I did a little bit. It's no big deal. I also carried an acorn squash mixture. So I pre-prepared the acorn squash. It had no added sugar in it, right? This was fresh acorn squash from the store that I steamed in a microwave. It had salt and pepper on it, olive oil on it, butter on it, along with Chinese 5 spices, a little bit of that. And then it was scraped into a container and mashed, kept in the refrigerator. Then we took it into the canyon. And each morning before we would start out on the trail, I would have a tablespoon of that. And then usually on the trail itself, I would supplement the fat and protein that I was eating usually we would make like one stop for this during the day. Then I would also have a tablespoon of that. And that tended to work out really good. And then to finish, here are the types of containers that we carried in the canyon. You can see that I have 2-liter bottles here. These are 2-liter bottles from Club Soda. And there are other solutions for carrying water besides this. I'm the only one who did this in the group, right? But that's because of my climbing background. These 2-liter bottles are super good because they seal well, they don't leak, and they're explosion proof. You know, if you drop one on the ground when you're unpacking or something like that, they're not going to sprout a leak in general. Like, you have to get pretty aggro with these to damage them. And I know this from the climbing world because I've dropped haul bags before on pendulums where these bottles completely full of water in the haul bag slammed against the granite wall, and there were no leakages. And the other reason I like these is that when you're not using them, you literally can roll them up, put the lid on it so it's sealed and it's easy to pack. And then when you need it, all you have to do is open the lid and blow it up, and you get the container back. It's not perfect when it comes back, but it's good enough. And then you can see when you look at the containers here, I had some trays, some Ziploc trays. And what I would do with my containers is fill the tray flat, and then the container would go into the pack. And that way, if there was a leakage event, the leakage would have been captured by the tray. And I say would have been because I didn't have any leakage events. And I had 2 of these trays. So the way I would pack my pack is the sleeping bag, the other crushables and things like that would go in. And then that would be followed by, the 2 trays of my Ziploc containers, which sealed and were really nice to pre-package the food in. And then I had a nylon bag that had um, other food-related things that were in there, that I wanted to be handy, but could not cause a leakage event, like the cheese and the salami and stuff like that went into that stuff sack. And then that stuff all went on top of the 2 trays. Easy to pack, in and out of the pack. And we and I were keto for the entire trip. So now with that, I want to turn this over to T, because I'm sure she has some contributions to this and some differences in how she did this. So let's go to her now.
Okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I did things a little bit differently. I actually have to say that this is my first time ever really preparing for something like this, being in the full-blown keto lifestyle. So I kind of was just going off of what I currently had in my pantry. So I did a lot of pre-cooking, specifically with steak. I basically went to Costco, got a big steak, a carne asada. I pre-cooked it. I sliced it, and I put it into 3 Ziploc bags for 3 different nights. And then I was also preparing for extra food, just a little bit like of a variety, for my fiance. So we made meatballs from scratch, just plain beef meatballs with mozzarella cheese, and salt and egg. And then I also prepared 3 bags of that. And then I tried to keep it as simple as possible. So I really made, 3 bags of broccoli just to keep it, I was just kind of eating the variety of different things throughout the 3 days, but dinners I was trying to keep as simple as possible. For breakfast, I actually pre-made a quiche, basically like an egg muffin, I would say, egg muffin tin, where I made egg, I put mushrooms, spinach, and mozzarella cheese as well. So just to really try and keep the fat intake in there, and lots of salt, as well as we pre-cooked a ton of bacon that I actually also put into 3 Ziploc containers. We did 6 total for both of us so that we would have enough breakfast. And that was a really smart thing to do, just because I was preparing the meal to have enough fat, enough salt, that would, keep me in ketosis. For snacks, I packed a lot of the same stuff that my dad did. I did a lot. Costco has really great like salami packets where they have prosciutto, salami, some other ham thing, right? So I went to Costco and we got 2 big things of that, as well as they have easy sliced, already sliced deli cheese, just like the regular cheddar cheese, that I basically packaged into separate snack containers for lunches, as well as my mom actually brought me meat sticks from her company, and I had sardines as well as some cheese crisps that I also got from Costco. And then the packets of tuna, I would actually go, because I really like cheese crisps and tuna. So I would just go get the tuna, not the cans, but the actual packets, not put anything in there, but just eat the tuna packets kind of as is. That worked really well for me. My pack, I actually really like the strategy that my dad did with his Ziploc, like the containers. The only thing I would say is that his bag was a lot bigger than mine. It was an 80-liter bag, and mine was a 65. So I'm not sure if I do this again. I rented my backpack, which is a whole nother thing I'm never doing again. A whole nother thing. But if I end up doing it, that is something where I'd consider probably getting a little bit of a bigger bag just so that I can actually pack containers. I had no leakage problems, so each of the containers I put inside of a bigger Ziploc bag and wrapped those up. But realistically, the same strategy I had was my sleeping bag, my jackets, whatever, the food to keep it insulated, and then everything else on top. I also brought my own heavy cream, which lasted the whole time, which I was really happy about. And so in the morning, I don't really load my coffee in the morning in general. I just do coffee and heavy cream. Reason being is I have a pretty sensitive stomach now, and high butter in the morning makes my stomach really upset. I think with the acidity of the coffee, so I can only really have a little bit of coffee, and the butter just seemed to make my stomach really upset. So I don't really add salt or butter. I just do heavy cream and coffee. One thing I did do though, one of my biggest concerns on this hike was, what if I start, and this maybe is the time to open the discussion or get questions, but one of the things that I was concerned about is we're doing this really extreme hike. We hiked 20.5 miles in some of the hardest terrain that I have ever seen in my 26 years. And I was worried about cramping. What if my body was going to give out? I have no idea. I was just really worried. So I know for me, a lot of the other people in our group were drinking electrolytes. I don't drink electrolytes because I believe my dad doesn't either. He makes his own. But the only thing I have is salt. And the reason being is electrolytes have a ton of sugar in them a lot of times. And it's not something that makes my body feel good. It's not something that I ever feel like I needed. So the thing that I made sure that I had a lot of was salt, just in case, because I know that when my body, with being in the keto lifestyle for so long, I know that if my body starts to cramp, if I start to get a headache, if my body feels like it's about to shut down after a workout or whatever, which happened when I first started the keto lifestyle. Now it doesn't happen. That means that my salt intake wasn't enough. So I made sure I had enough salt if I needed it. But again, my meals were really salty. And I made that way for a specific purpose, because I didn't want to be having to, drink salt, stop and, drink salt or whatever. So I kind of planned it that I put all the stuff in my food in the beginning that I fully needed during this trip. And that seemed to really actually help me during the whole 20.5 miles. So a little bit different strategy, but yeah.
So to Tia, yes, I think that T spent 2 days cooking. I spent 1 day cooking. Is that correct, T?
I spent 2 days. Yeah. I just didn't want to do all of it at once. So I spent 2 days.
So yeah, we were really careful about that because both of us took meat down there, and we did not carry anything that was fresh that way, right? We cooked everything, and thank you very much for this question, because one of the things that neither one of us has addressed is that we were there for 4 days. I would say the hottest temperature during the day was around the mid 80s, and neither one of us had any problem with food going bad. So, and I want to point out to the people that are listening, for me, in the last year, this is the third time I've made a long relatively speaking, a relatively long backpacking trip, 4 days. And in none of those three cases have I had food go bad. So we know that we can go, on a 4-day backpacking trip, and pre-prepare the food and stay keto for the entire length of time.
And I just want to jump in there and say, so yeah, Tia, I actually did, I pre-cooked the carne asada, just to see. We actually ate it for dinner one night. And I mean, at Costco, they're like massive. So we ate it for dinner one night, and then I was like, this will be perfect to just chop up. We actually still have some of it frozen. So yeah, I tried it before because I was not going to eat something I didn't like down there. And the meatballs, yep, I make those all the time. Diego loves meatballs. He loves them. So it's something that we make in the house a lot, that I knew that it's simple enough to cook and to heat up, and then to be able to eat it. The other thing I wanted to mention with the water, Dad had mentioned that he'd opened his container of salmon and he left the water in there. If you have if you've ever tried camping with these little stoves, like these camping stoves, they suck with getting food at the bottom, like getting food stuck at the bottom. So one thing we actually started doing to warm up the food was putting water at the bottom, so that our meat and veggies and stuff wouldn't actually get stuck to the bottom of the pan. So that water really, really helped which was a really smart idea to keep that water from the cans in there because it really gets soaked up in your food anyway. And it really helps in the cleaning process because you don't really have a scrubber or we were like, Diego was using sand to really scrub the bottom of our pans down there. So just take that into consideration. The water from cans is really helpful when warming up food too.
So this question comes from JC, and I really appreciate you asking this question because I realize that I forgot to talk about this issue. So when we go on the keto lifestyle, one of the questions that we have is, what about the exercise issue? And then when would it be appropriate to go on a backpacking trip? Because obviously there are differences, right? If you're going out on a backpacking trip in a forest preserve or something where it's flat the whole time you're walking, maybe it's not a big deal. But you really need to be keto adapted in order to be able to do exercise and also do things like what we're talking about here, a trip like this into the Grand Canyon. And the reason for that, and I highly recommend this, especially for those of you that are pursuing gout remission by going onto the low carb lifestyle. But this argument is the same for anyone. So if you're a type 2 diabetic, there's an obesity issue, it's a cardiovascular, whatever the reason is why you're going on this lifestyle, you need to get keto adapted. And that usually takes 2 to 3 months of being religiously compliant with the lifestyle, staying at 50 grams of total carbs or less per day. And the length of time to keto adaptation, I'm saying 2 to 3 months, can actually be significantly longer. And I'm probably, and you're listening to someone right now whose keto adaptation took longer than 2 to 3 months. And I'm in my 60s. Could this be age related? I don't know. But I'm pretty sure as soon as I'm done speaking that T will pipe in and she'll talk about her experience too. But during the process of keto adaptation, your body has not really shifted over. There's profound changes that happen in our body when we're becoming fat burning animals. And exercise during that adaptation period is pretty miserable. Like, I'm a CrossFit athlete and I was doing CrossFit 5 to 6 days a week during my entire keto adaptation. And I can tell you the only thing that got me through some of those workouts was just sheer willpower. Because in that transition, you are fundamentally dependent on the glucose glycogen pathway of energetics, period. And until you become adapted to burning fat, and there is a profound shift here, then you are not going to feel good. So I don't recommend filling your backpack and thundering down into the Grand Canyon or hiking up to the lower saddle on the Grand Canyon in the first few weeks that you are on the low carb lifestyle, because I can tell you right now, you'll probably just turn around and go back to the car, right? You need to be keto adapted. Now, JC's, without realizing it, I think he asked the question that I just answered. However, with gout sufferers, we have an additional thing, because when you start the ketogenic diet, your uric acid is necessarily going to rise. And I've published a lot of videos in this area. This morning, I don't want to get into the science. We want to have some fun with this and talk about how wonderful exercise programs and doing things in the outdoors can be once you're keto adapted here. I want to stick to that. But with a gout sufferer, it's really important to be keto adapted. You got to get past the situation where the uric acid has risen, then it's going to come back down. And I feel pretty strongly that you can split our population into two groups. One group, when the uric acid comes down, is that uric acid's going to fall into the middle of the reference range, and they're really lucky with this. The other group, the uric acid's going to fall to the top of the reference range. That would be moi. The whole point behind another point behind the keto adaptation that I didn't get to here is that you fundamentally lower the systemic inflammation with lowering some of the proteins that are actually involved in a gout flare. And you are lowering the systemic inflammation, not only globally in the body, but also in the chondrocytes, which are in the joint. And I believe that once you get to that point, you're suitably keto adapted, which you can monitor by finger sticking and doing other biomarkers and just in general common sense. How do you feel when you do some exercise? Once you get keto adapted, then doing exercise, even with moderately high uric acid, is not an issue. It has definitely not been an issue for me. So I recommend getting keto adapted and getting back to living life.
No, I agree 100%. I do have to jump in, and I think I kind of commented on this in the beginning when I said, one of the things I was worried about doing this massive hike was the fact of, okay, how is my body going to feel, right? Like cramping wise, like, and I've done, luckily I grew up in a house with both my parents being extremely outdoorsy. So I've been in positions before where my body is cramping, I'm getting headaches, all this stuff is happening. And so that was my biggest concern is I'm like, what if I get to the bottom of this canyon and all of a sudden, or we're at the top and I'm getting, my body starts cramping, my head starts hurting. And the reason that kind of came up too is because when I first started the keto lifestyle I think it's like 3 years in general, about 3 years ago. One of the things that happened to me when I first started working out on this lifestyle was I would get really faint. I had a hard time. I remember there was a CrossFit class that I went to, and I was doing deadlifts, and it was really hard for me. Like my body was like, I felt very like, whoa, for a second, like what's kind of going on? I got really nauseous. I got a headache. I got all of the above. And I had just started, I think I was like 2 weeks into this low carb lifestyle. So for me, that was pretty, like, I was a little bit like, okay, that's pretty painful. But now that I've been keto adapted for so long, for almost 3 years now, I've been in ketosis for a while. I think I would have been so uncomfortable going into the canyon had I not been fully keto adapted. So for me, being in this like high, this keto lifestyle is made it possible for me to actually get out of the canyon, I believe.
So let's just let me piggyback on what you just said, because I want our audience to understand that both of us have been keto adapted for a long time. I'm in my 4th year now. I'm solid for 3 years, and now I'm in my 4th year. And once keto adapted, it took me about a year actually. So when you talk to, a lot of people out there that are in the lifestyle, this particular lifestyle, they'll talk about keto adaptation in the context of like fasting glucose and A1C and things like that. But let me just explain very quickly with one sentence. It's way more involved than that. And you can gauge a lot of this by virtue of how you feel. And so I want to point out to the audience that I strength train twice a week. I do hits at least 2 days a week, in addition to generalized other forms of movement, including if you listen to Peter Attia, Zone 2 training, which is to just give the viewer an idea that going for a walk, but at a speed where you're nose breathing the entire time. You can hold a conversation, but you're thinking the entire time you wish the other person would shut up because you really don't want to have to respond, right? That's what Zone 2 is. And so the arguments, and granted, this is N1, this is anecdotal what I'm talking about, but the arguments that you can't do strength training, that you can't do HIIT, that you can't do things like what we just did, go into the Grand Canyon, if you are truly low carb, is just a false narrative. That's what it is, right? There are definite advantages, and you can see them this last weekend in the canyon. Firstly, we eat less over the course of the day when we're working hard. We are not having to snack continuously, all right? We don't hit the wall. We don't get to the point where you are so hungry, you're seeing stars, you're not feeling very good, and you have this sense, holy crap, right now, and I have to eat, and I have to eat right now. We don't have those kinds of events. You can look at the scientific literature on this, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of good literature supporting what I'm arguing in terms of strength training and HIIT exercises. That mainly has to do with the fact that you cannot find elite athletes that are focused in those areas who are willing to spend the time to get keto adapted and risk sponsorship in order to do those studies. On the other side of that, there's actually a lot of literature in the area of endurance. And a lot of endurance athletes are turning to the ketogenic lifestyle for the reasons that I just talked about. You don't hit the wall. In a marathon, you don't have to be sucking down the gels all the way through that, right? And so on. So, once you're keto adapted in this lifestyle, I feel like there are no doors that have been closed to me. And as far as the things that I can do, the serious backpacking is one of those issues. And I'm also a rock climber, and I know that I can go climbing all day at a fairly high level. I spent weeks last summer doing this very thing. And again, it's interesting to watch the people that I'm with who are carb eaters, because they're having to eat their power bars and their high sugar drinks, the sports drinks. They're eating that stuff all day long. Me, I'm drinking water, and I might, if I need to, take a couple of bites of some salami and cheese, and I'm good to go all day long. And then there's an additional benefit here, and that's also the recovery. The recovery's better. It's faster. Anyway, I'm done talking. T, what do you got? I must have gotten something going with you.
No, this is, I think everything you said was accurate. I would say definitely you did pipe the question of water intake. For me, I drink, ever since starting the low carb lifestyle, I try and drink a lot of water. A lot. I mean, I've actually found that my body, I consume a lot more water than I did on the high carb when I was a high carb. Actually, I was a carb addict when I was really high carb. So for me, I felt the same way. I hydrated massively beforehand. I drank a ton of water. When we were at the river, I drank a ton of water, just constantly really consuming a bunch of water. I never felt like I needed electrolytes or a gel pack. Actually, those things, I hated them anyway. They tasted like crap to me. So the fact that I wasn't, that I was hiking and I didn't feel like I needed to stop in, there's definitely, when my body was so overexerted for lunch, I have to say I did definitely was like, okay, I need to stop and eat something, for me, that's kind of where I would like to stop, and I can keep going, but I would like to stop and feel my body, feel it up a little bit more. But when I did that, I mean, I ate a couple meat sticks. I had my cheese with salami, and then really took the time to either eat a couple pieces of salt or really intake a lot more water. So, I mean, I have to say that there was times this hike was really hard. There was times, especially on our second day in the heat, that I felt like my spirit was broken, like my soul was broken. Like, I have to honestly say that there was that time where, you're sitting in the sun and you're climbing up this mountain and you look up and you're like, the only way I'm getting out of this damn canyon is if I hike out of it, and your body wants to give out, and you consider, how much does it cost for a helicopter out of here again? As you decide it might deplete your whole savings account. Is it worth it? That was what was going through my head. So this, by any means, wasn't an easy hike. But I was able to get through it. And I think a big part of that was because I am, number one, keto adapted. It's what works best for my body. The other thing is I didn't dive into any carbs. I am notorious. I have to say this, and this is something I want to point out to our listeners or anybody listening who's maybe my age or in my age group has a tendency. I was an athlete, a track and cross country athlete for 9 years. So for me, I would run, 14, 15 miles on the weekend, and then we would carb load. I mean, it was notorious for us to have spaghetti parties and super carb loads. So I think psychologically, normally after high periods of exercise like that, I got so used to craving carbs. I mean, honestly, chocolate, spaghetti, bread. I mean, because that's the stigma behind if you're a cross country, long distance, or a track runner. We have spaghetti parties, we carb load. So that was one of my biggest concerns, is because my fiance is not full blown keto like me, right? And he had these packets of pasta and rice and cheese and everything. And normally I would have been probably the person that was so overexerted and exhausted to be like, I need that, let me eat I need the carbs. And I did not get to that point. I mean, I was really proud of myself, because we have a support group every Monday at 5. So if you're interested in joining, please reach out to us. It's just literally, we talk about stuff. Where I set my goal for the Grand Canyon to be like, I don't want to get to the bottom of that and have to just dive into copious, I need sugar, I need, and my body never got to that point. There was not one time that I sat down at dinner and looked at these high pasta meals or high, stuff to the left and right of me where I was like, I need some of that. My body was like, no way. Like, I didn't have even a craving for it. And to me, that was a massive accomplishment, because that was a challenge within itself, something that, I do this lifestyle because it makes me feel a lot better. Because it helps my body a lot, and it's helped me really overcome some issues I was having, such as migraines and hormonal stuff that was going on. So I always have that, I could eat carbs. I could eat high carbs again if I so chose to. And the fact that my body and my mentality was so against it at this point of you're working, and it didn't happen, it made me feel really, really, I was really proud of myself when I got out of that canyon and said, I stayed keto this whole time. And I checked my ketones 2 days after, and I was at 3.6 ketones, which is the highest I've been.
That was fasting, right?
That was fasting yeah. Ketones, 3.6. And I was like completely mind blown, because normally when I test in the morning, fasting ketones is I'm around 0.8 to 0.9. 0.8 is like my go-to normally every single morning, fasting 0.8 with like a glucose level of like 86 or 89. So when I tested, I thought my monitor was broken. I had to retest it. So I was really proud.
So we had a question here. This is sort of like at the edge of what it is we're really focused on today. So I'll just be really fast. I stay away from artificial sweeteners for 2 reasons, both of which have been substantiated in the literature. Reason number 1 is because they can stimulate insulin. And one of the dominant reasons we're in this lifestyle is to bring the expression of insulin down to what I'm going to argue is a normal level. And so I don't want to be eating something that doesn't have a glucose response, right? Like an artificial sweetener is not going to elevate your glucose, but it may well, at a very substantial level, elevate your insulin. And then the second reason is, and there's solid science on this too, is that artificial sweeteners, they drive your cravings for sugar. And a good many people that go into this lifestyle who are reversing diabetes, who are putting gout in remission, the obesity issue, right? They're compelled to lower the carbs in their life, yet there is an issue of sugar cravings that is there and can sabotage their process. So by eating artificial sweeteners, you're actually perpetuating those cravings. And in my view, this is one of the central reasons why when people argue, well, the keto lifestyle is not sustainable, this is probably the number 1 reason, actually. If that if that statement was true, which I don't believe it is. I think for some people who have sustainability problems, that this is the number one reason why they exist, right? So I did not bring artificial sweeteners or use them, and I don't use them in my lifestyle. And so I suppose that this, by extension, you could be talking about all of the keto products that are being marketed to us now. And this is one of the main reasons to stay away from them, because probably the majority of them have artificial sweeteners in them. And that's not doing you any favors. I would stay away.
So, and I'm going to comment on that too, because again, I have, tried my realm of things. I am I'm going to be very honest. I'm a sugar addict. And so for me, if I have artificial sweeteners, and like I was just talking about that, the high carbs, that craving aspect for me has taken me a really long time to overcome. For me, artificial sweeteners, is something that I have tried, but like my dad was just saying, it seems to really stimulate the cravings for me. If I have an artificial sweetener, and I'm going to say this, and like, I know how my body works. So it's really depending on you, number one, but I know how my body works. And when I have an artificial sweetener, there is a pang of hunger, which I associate with being hangry. So before I started this low carb lifestyle, everybody talks about these hangry events, right? These hangry events are things that happen during high carb events when you crash, right? And I'm going to say is a crash. And the reason I say this is because my mom would always be like, okay, T's hangry, like, because I was awful. Like I was nasty when I was super hungry. And I've noticed with artificial sweeteners, when I have them, it associates to me, it feels like it does that quick high again, I just like filled this. And then when it hits the bottom, I feel hungry, like hangry again. So it kind of associates it's a little bit different. So I have a tendency to stay away from those, just because number one, I don't want the sugar cravings back, period. I really don't. And two, because I don't want to feel hangry, because it's not nice.
So to be respectful of everyone's time, we're at 52 minutes now, so we will be closing out. I am getting a ton of questions in regard to what the situation is with the low carb lifestyle and gout remission. So remember, everyone, that our YouTube channel is Dr. Pete's Keto Club. And we have now an extensive library on how to do the lifestyle for gout remission. But let me just summarize very quickly what needs to be done for that. And keep in mind, if you're not a gout sufferer, it really makes no difference. What I'm about to say is true for you too. If what it is you want to do is reverse diabetes, you want to reverse obesity, and you want to improve your cardiovascular platform, it's the same. So number one, you must eliminate sugar, which is 50% by mass fructose. You need to eliminate high fructose corn syrup. You need to eliminate agave syrups, eliminate honey. You need to eliminate processed foods, of which when you walk into a supermarket, basically anything that is in a bottle, a package, or a box is a processed food. The reason why we need to do that, to eliminate that class of foods that we're talking about right now, is because fructose is a direct driver of gout. Number two, we need to eliminate alcohol, because alcohol is also a direct driver of gout. So during the process of keto adaptation, you must eliminate the alcohol, and you must eliminate the sugar substances that I just talked about. They just need to go. Then we cut into the carbs, and our target for our daily carb consumption is going to be 50 grams of total carbs or less. If you're a serious type 2 diabetic and you want to reverse diabetes, you probably are going to need to get underneath the 50 gram mark, like 20 grams of total carbs per day. we count the carbs. We don't count the other stuff. We get keto adapted. We monitor uric acid, blood glucose, ketones, weight, and blood pressure, right? We monitor our biomarkers. And I think that in this program today, that's a good summary. You can reach out to us. I put in the show notes. This video is live also on our YouTube channel. In our show notes, you can reach out to me under Ask Dr. Pete anything, right? There's a link there. You can fill that out, send it to us. We're not going to try to sell you anything or take your email address and start sending you things. We're not doing that. You can ask questions there and I will answer them back. And then we also have our website there with our programs and whatnot. And we also have our Discord link. I think I put it there. I will double check when we're done here. And the Discord link is important because, as Tanner mentioned, we have a free support group. We meet 5 p.m. Arizona time, 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time every single Monday. And it's confidential. You can join on there. And it's a support group. So we're all there to help each other get through the issues of being on the low carb lifestyle, the sugar addiction, alcohol addiction, nicotine. It's basically all the same when it comes down to supporting one another and making these important changes. T, what would you like to add?
No, I just wanted to say that we are here. Definitely if you guys, sorry, my dog is like she's coming over to say hi. So she's like all up in my face, but we're here for support and questions. Again, I think our support group that we have every Monday is a really fun environment. It's not something where we spend, 3 hours talking about stuff. We really just sit down. We talk about our goals, our accomplishments for the week, the things that we failed on, and then the things that we're going to improve on and set some new goals. It's kind of like a diary resetting with a group of people that are all on the same journey for different reasons, whether, you're in gout remission, whether you have PCOS. I'm a female, so I'm going to say that. I'm going to bring all the females to the group for PCOS or hormonal issues that you might be going through. It's just a really great spot. So feel free to really, really utilize that, and great place to ask questions too.
All right. And with that, we're going to close out. Everyone have a great end of the week, and look for us next Friday. Either we release a pre-recorded video or we'll be live again. Every week is different. Topics are always focused on being in this lifestyle successfully. All right. So everyone have a great day and see you next week.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week.